My audience for my story speech is my boyfriend Eric and my mom Katina. Have you ever heard of the saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade? Well, I was handed some pretty sour lemons on the morning of April 12, 2018. I was a sophomore in high school at the time, and I had just gotten my license 4 months prior. I was on my way to school that morning, getting ready to turn out of my neighborhood onto a busy main road, where I had to make a left-hand turn. I looked both ways to make sure it was clear before I proceeded onto the main road. When I looked out of my passenger side window, everything looked good and it was clear. But when I looked over to my driver's side, this is where I noticed something was a little bit off. There was a spider on my driver's side window. Now, if you need to know anything about me, it's that spiders and I don't get along. So with my bad instincts at the time, I decided to proceed onto the main road while trying to figure out what to do with this spider. I looked down into the center of my car and noticed that there was an empty granola bar wrapper from a few days prior. I decided to grab the wrapper and kill the spider while I was driving down the road. Good news here was, the spider was dead. But the bad news was, when I looked back up to keep going to school, I was headed off a 20-foot embankment because I had driven off the side of the road. I was going directly for a few trees and knew that I needed to brace myself or else I could get severely injured. I decided to grab my steering wheel and push myself back as hard as I could onto the back of my seat so I didn't end up flying forward at all. After I did make impact with the trees, I sat there for a minute to reflect on what had just happened. I instantly started crying out of fear and knew that I needed to call my mom. Now, to my luck of that day, my mom was in the shower and didn't answer. I then tried to call my stepdad, who was at work about 20 minutes away from where I had gotten into the accident. He told me he would get there as soon as possible, but I knew I needed someone to be there a little quicker than that. So I ended up calling my best friend's mom, who I knew lived just down the road from where I had gotten into the accident. She arrived in just a few minutes, and 911 had already been called by a guy who had seen me drive off the road. When the firefighters got there, and the cops as well, my mom had already arrived. The firefighters helped me up to the top of the road and took my vitals to clear me. The cops went down and examined the scene of the accident and asked me a few questions about what had happened. They told me that my car was totaled and that it was going to need to be towed to get an estimate on how much money we would get for it. I later had time that day to reflect on what had happened. Since this accident, I have become a much safer driver, and I now make sure to examine my car to make sure everything is good before I start driving. This accident has taught me to make some pretty good lemonade out of some pretty sour lemons.